is there a sense of, I don't know what the right word is. It's not gratitude. That's a bit glib. Is there a sense of awe in that? Or is there a sense of, do you believe there's meaning in that? Or do you believe that there's no meaning in that? And that it's just as fortunate, it's just as much luck as the world is full of bad luck, right? If I think of all the, I'm much more familiar, as I'm sure you and many people listening are, we're much more familiar with the opposite, right? It's like the person who did everything right and they just happened to get hit by some drunk idiot who ran a red light, and there was, virtually nothing they could have done to have prevented it. It's purely a lightning strike. And how often does bad luck take a life just as remarkable luck saved a life? Do you process it like that at all?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we all are sort of looking for meaning in the universe, and nothing, there are no coincidences, and everything happens for a reason, and all those sort of like narratives that we put on, I think, a fairly random universe. And I mean, random, but for the laws of physics. But in terms of the events of our life, like, so I was at an American outpost in Afghanistan, and I was shocked to feel some sand flick into the side of my face. Bullets travel faster than sound, right? And the outpost would get attacked from about 500 meters out, which is quite a long shot for an AK-47 or a PKM. And by the time those bullets arrive, the bullets arrive way before the sound does, right? So some sand flicked into the side of my face. I just had time to think, what was that? I was standing against some sandbags. What was that? And then I heard da 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 da, and so that was the first burst of an hour-long firefight, and the bullets had to have hit with maybe an inch or two from my forehead, right? In my opinion, utterly random, right? I was blown up by an IED. It went off under the engine block instead of under us. The guy with the Taliban guy with the clacker in the ravine missed it by a second, right? But the whole rest of my life unfolded because of that. It's contained in that second, right? In some ways, and because we were spared. And so at one point I was at a reading early on, right when the book came out, and a guy raised his hand at the end. He was quite agitated, and he said, "I'm Christian, and you're alive because of God's grace, and you have to come to Jesus and understand that it was only God's grace that saved you." And I said to him, one of my best friends, my brother, my colleague Tim Hetherington, was killed in combat in Libya on an assignment I was supposed to be on. His death was what got me out of war reporting, and then had a family, et cetera. And, he bled out also, right? I mean, from a wound in his groin, but he was in a war zone and they couldn't save him. And so I said to the guy, I said, my problem with that way of thinking, that there's some purpose here, some meaning here, is why me, right? Like, why me and not Tim? For that matter, why me and not some 9-year-old with cancer? I'm sorry. Like, and if God is running a random lottery for his grace, I don't want any part of it, right? I think that the universe is run in, it unfolds in random ways. And I just got super, super lucky. But the fact that I got that lucky makes me profoundly grateful, and is also incredibly depressing to me. And for reasons that I can't quite understand, but I just sort of think about what was statistically supposed to happen by a factor of maybe 10 to 1 or something, or more. Probably more. Right. And
have you spoken with others? I'm just very curious about that, Sebastian. The gratitude makes a lot of sense to me, and I don't know how I would feel in your situation. So this is curiosity and not certainly not judgment. I'm curious though if you've spoken with others who have survived, similar experiences. I think of my friend Rick Elias. I should introduce you guys. So Rick was on that U.S. Airways flight that had to emergency land in the Hudson. Right. So again, you've got this guy, Captain Sullenberger, who, he's the one out of
the Dombrowski
50, of right. That's exactly right. He's the one out of 50 guys that could have actually make the right decision with enough time to spare, and then carried it out. And again, that's he wasn't supposed to live, right? And I've never asked him this question, but I'm, this would be an interesting topic, is how many other people on this planet who are alive only because of monumental luck. What is the balance between the gratitude and the heaviness of that tips into sort of dysthymia?
If I didn't have children, I think it would be psychologically a little easier. But what it would have left them with was such a legacy of pain and absence, and my poor wife, that made it sort of harder. And so the things that it would have consoled me, like holding my daughter, like I survived, and here I'm holding my daughter in my lap, and I immediately think, oh, but this wasn't supposed to happen, right? She's supposed to be grieving me right now. By odds of 100 to 1, she should, and it's a miracle. And then I would just spin out into what could have happened. And I eventually talked to her shrink, right? I mean, my wife was like, honey, you're getting a little hard to live with. Like, can you seek help? And it was a great thing to do. And it really, really helped me. And my therapist was basically, she was like, listen, if you keep telling yourself this narrative that you almost died, you're never going to escape this incredible anxiety and panic disorder and depression that you've worked yourself into. You have to stop telling yourself this story. She was absolutely right. And apparently this sort of negative storytelling is very, very common in people who almost died. Like, the sequence of really, really profound anxiety and fear, medical paranoia. It's going to happen again any moment. I'm going to bleed out again, like that sort of paranoia. And then that finally eased off, and I wound up in this like unbelievable depression. And I've never been depressed in my life, right? And I'm not a particularly anxious person. And I was amazed at how debilitating depression was. And I finally got it because I've had friends who have struggled with depression. I lost a friend to suicide, and suddenly I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about. Like, why bother going through the rest of your life? Like that kind of thought. Like, I had no idea. Like it really opened a door into like, oh, I had no idea. That's when people say depression, this is what they're talking about. And, it was quite frightening. One of the problems, so I had trouble. I know we have to get back to the nurse, which is part of this problem, right? This reality problem that I had. I was having trouble understanding, being confident about what reality was and what it wasn't. And part of that stemmed from this somewhat clairvoyant dream that I had. So I just have to reiterate, I'm really not a spiritual, mystical, or woo-woo person. I'm really not, right? Which is why this stuff unsettled me so much, right?
Much more your father than your mother.
Much more, right?